I think you guys will also agree with me that some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life have been FBI agents. I mean,
Oh,
just one of the things I miss most is when there's a big event, like I'm sure we all remember 9/11, and you're in a room and you're in there with bomb techs and it's just explosive experts, WMD experts, all these people, Middle Eastern experts on, and as this thing is unfolding, just to watch that, it gives me goosebumps right now. Just knowing the work that we did then and during other large scale cases where it is, you just go home and you're just in awe with the brains and the brawn that we were able to witness firsthand.
hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ray. First episode of season 5. I can't believe we've come this far.
I know we got a special guest today. It's FBI agent Maureen O'Connell, who specializes in investigating street gangs as well as cartel-level narcotic organizations at the Los Angeles Field Division. She comes from a long line of law enforcement personnel dating back over 100 years. Maureen, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. It's great to see you guys. How you fellas doing?
We're great. Let's throw in there retired special agent.
Oh yes, I'm retired.
Yes, and for a few years. Looks like she could be a rookie coming out of the academy, doesn't she, Ray?
She does. You know, usually Jim starts out going, "Hey, how you doing?" You know,
How you doing?
That's how it usually starts out.
Yeah.
But I let Ray do it tonight just so to share the wealth here of the Philly thing we have on our side. But Maureen, we've, again, as we talked earlier, we never really knew each other that in the Bureau. But afterwards, through our friend Jim Clemente, some of the TV work we were doing, different books and audiobooks we were involved in, you and I became friendly. I introduced you to Ray, and the natural progression is, of course, bringing you on the Cold Red podcast. And we do like to ask a little bit up front of our guests, you know, how did they ever get into the FBI? And Ray and I have shared our stories and other guests. But tell us a little bit about your family, which I'm not sure I even knew about going back 100 years. And there's firefighters, police. How did you wind up at the FBI Academy in 1991, I think you said?
I'm not sure it was 100 years, but I guess it would probably be close to 100 years. My grandparents emigrated from Ireland, and my grandfather, who didn't speak a word of English, ended up becoming a Chicago police officer. And, so we lived on the South Side. I grew up on the South Side of Chicago, and our family's first home, where I had all my formative years, was on the same block that my mom grew up. Several doors down from us was my mom's dear friend, known to us as Betsy Mullins, but she actually was Betsy Curley, and she was the IO of the Chicago division. And for those that don't know what that means, there's 2 silos in the FBI, the sworn gun toters and everybody else. And the IO is the person in charge of everybody else in that office. And one time when I was very small, I want to say probably 6 or so, my mom was coffee clutching with Betsy at the kitchen table. And for some strange reason, with the entire O'Connell brood, I was the only one there. And my mom said, "I saw a bunch of agents over at your house the other day. What was going on?" And she was talking about some big case. And even though she was the IO, it was some big case that they had a big deadline on. And the old timers asked her to do some typing for her over the weekend or something. And she was saying, "I love my guys and I'll do anything for them," and how great the work is that they were doing. And I just said, when I grow up, I'm going to be an FBI agent. And they both laughed and they said, "There are no girl FBI agents." And I said, "When I grow up, there will be, and I'm going to be one." And they laughed. And I just thought, and then I became.
And you showed them.
Mm-hmm. And Betsy was very proud of me, and she was very, very. She was still the IO or whatever when she wasn't the IO when I was that little when this conversation happened, but she was the IO when I became an agent, and she was just bursting with pride. She was so sweet. She made me cry.
You know, that's really something when they trust somebody that much to actually allow them to type things up at their home versus coming into the office.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I ever remember that happening. Everything was done in the office. You ever remember that happening?
Not me.
So she was doing some work for him. I just assumed, something tells me it was typing, but I don't remember. What other work could she be doing?
I don't know. Maybe she's organizing. She had documents, but I mean, I just think she must have been pretty special. to
She
be
was
able to do
very
that at home.
special.
Yeah.
They adored her there.
I've met a few older women over the years, some in their 90s now, that including in my extended family who worked for the FBI, and they have some very interesting stories. They remember like it's just, even they have little, Alzheimer's going on. They remember almost like yesterday when they shook hands with J. Ed Groove or whatever. He would come visit their division, or they'd go to Washington D.C. So there's a whole coterie of folks like that in the IO side or the non-gun and badge carrying side that
Right.
Hoover was treated very well. And they were, of course, very important to the function of the FBI, just
Right.
like they are today. So, Maureen, you went to DePaul University, got your bachelor's there. You didn't go right into the Bureau, I'm sure. Did you do a few things for a few years?
Well, I was actually working for the Chicago Machine for several years throughout my young adulthood. We were all straight Democrats, Kennedy Democrats back in those days. And I did a lot of volunteer work also with Misericordia and all that kind of stuff. But I worked with the Chicago Machine, and before I became an agent, I had my application in. I worked for a campaign there, and our candidate won. And the powers that be, as they often do in a city like Chicago, they offered me a job out in the suburbs, and I said, no, I need to work in the Cook County Jail. That's why I took this job. I was one of the very few paid campaigners. And I said, I want to work in Cook County Jail because I filled out an application to become an FBI agent, and I wanted to become acclimated with the criminal element, not realizing that, where I grew up gave me a lot of, great insight. But so they said, well, okay. And they gave me a job as a social worker, arguably the worst social worker in the history of social work. But I was a social worker at Cook County Jail on the south side of Chicago, which at that time was ranked the worst custodial facility in the United States. So that was very, very interesting. It's a very historic jail. I mean, Capone, you name everybody has made their way through that place. So that was the eye-opener of all eye-openers.
A real doctoral degree in criminal miscreant behavior, no doubt. And
Yes.
obviously the Bureau came along, and you're starting there before long.
Yes. So I joined, I went to the academy in 1991. It was great.
Go, Ray.
I have to ask, what was it like? I mean, now women had been for probably almost 20 years by the time you got there, probably 72. So you're about 19 years. What was it like for you? What was the ratio of male agents to female agents in your class?
Well, the Bureau was 8% female, the agent population when I joined, and it actually was no problem. I just loved it. But I came from a huge family, and I grew up in a neighborhood, and I played sports my whole life, and I was a water polo player, club water polo in college, and I subbed on a guys team. It was fine. I thought it was awesome. If you throw it on the table and just blurt it out, that's pretty much. And I came from a whole family of first responders, so it's just if you're sitting down when adults are working, you're in trouble in our family. And so it was great. I had no issues. Some issues I had initially was when I got to the Los Angeles division. There was a group of women, and they were tough on the young women that came in after them. So there was a whole group of us. We were in that 1991 hiring surge, and there were probably about a dozen or more of us, and we're all still great friends today. But this one group of women in particular, man, they were rough.
I heard over the years that all the sexual harassment in the workplace, at least the Bureau, some female agents would confide to me that they've had a lot worse situations with female supervisors than with male. Now, that's certainly what I've heard over a half dozen or so different female agents over the years. And it sounds like, at least in your early days in LA, that may have been the same for you too.
They weren't my supervisors. And I had good support from the guys on my squad and everything. So I just had to figure out a way to just let it roll off, and I did. and then it was fine. And once I got into narcotics and gangs, I mean, you're just running and gunning, and there's just no time for any of that. It's all at that point. It's all about doing the right thing, working hard, and backing each other up, and making sure we all go home. You know, when you have those type of things on your mind, you're not getting caught up in the drama. The drama part was, you know, working white collar initially, as I said, and a bunch of us cut our teeth doing that. But I couldn't wait to get over to the criminal side.
You know, I was going to ask you that. You know, LA is a huge office, as is New York. Philly is a large office too, but not quite the size of New York and or LA. And usually, I know when they send you to these new offices and you go in, the first thing they do is throw you on the applicant squad to teach you the paper and teach you the neighborhoods. Did you wind up right on white collar squad, or did they put you in applicants and then you eventually get over to the crim work?
No, it was white collar right away because we had all those FIF squads where all the banks were failing and everything. Yep. I mean, it was like baptism by fire. It was insane. It was just a lot of work.
Did you have any accounting background that they put you in a white collar squad?
No accounting background.
That would have been tricky. But you're right what you said earlier, and I found a lot of the time in my squads, certainly in New York, if you were busy on a criminal squad, you're running out the door, you're reactive, bank robberies, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, some days in New York, that was actually an easy day. You didn't have time for the drama. But you find, either you wind up in another unit somewhere or you have friends and they're like squads where they're not quite as busy. They're at their desk more. I was kind of jealous of these agents sometimes. And then you get back that there's quibbling between them, backstabbing, not just men and women. It could be in either, direction there. So I always said, give me a squad that's going to keep me really busy. Actually applies to life too. Keep yourself busy, work out, read, entertain yourself. If you sit around and just wait for the gossip to come to you, you're only going to be a problem. And that certainly applies to the Bureau. And I see you both nodding your head here. It sounds like you kind of agree with that.
But also, Fitz, when you're in a squad like that, you also have a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. I mean, just humanity. And when you're interacting with people during really tense situations, that's enough. And then you could just talk about that when you get back to the squad bay or during debriefing. And you just try to make light of it. And we all know about gallows humor and stuff. And we just did our best to, push through and laugh and try not to get too traumatized by some of the stuff. Mainly on the evidence response team is where I saw a lot of trauma. But also, like, even going into the homes of gangbangers where they had little children and stuff, and there's no food in the house. I mean, it's hard. It's not easy. And to me, law enforcement in general is also the dumping ground for every failed social experiment on earth. And they expect cops, mainly police officers, but to a certain extent FBI agents, they expect cops to be gentlemen, elegant, warriors, just everything, and just to be able to make split second decisions on life and death. They just expect us to be able to do everything. And it just, when people have high expectations like that, I guess it just makes it very difficult.
And Maureen, real quick, you're the wife of a retired LAPD officer, and
Hawthorne.
You're the mother.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Hawthorne PD, but a police department in Los Angeles, yes.
And you're the mother of a son who's currently a police officer, and you agreed before we end today, you're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a mom, but of a police officer, and you shared some things with me in the past. So we'll save that for the end here. Ray, did you have a question?
I wanted to throw this out because I wanted to see if you agree with this, Maureen, and even you, Jim, because you were a crim guy too. But what I found is working on the criminal squads, bank robbery fugitive squads in Philadelphia, is that the closeness of the agents on those squads was more so than any other squads in the division. And I think a lot of that is the result of we were all tactically sound. Most of us were SWAT team members. We went out almost every day doing an arrest or something. So we needed to depend on each other. And even after work, we got together more so than other agents did on other squads. Did you guys find that to be the same?
100%. Yes.
Yep.
And I remember one time in particular, Ray, where we were, one of the guys on my squad had an informant that had like $1 million bond on his head from some cartel. And I was going to be his girlfriend in this scenario that's about to unfold. So I was going to be driving him around, and it was a very dangerous. The whole day was going to be very dangerous. At this point, I'm a single mom, and beforehand, we're all out in a parking lot doing our briefing, and I always had a football in the trunk of my car to toss around because I like throwing a football. So we're throwing a football around and we're looking at each other, and it was so strange that, as you threw the ball, we were looking at each other like, if things go really south, are you guys going to be there for my family? There was just this strange sense of, you are my people, you are my bureau family. This is,
Right.
I hope we all go home tonight. And it
How'd
was,
that work out?
well, I'm sitting in the car with the guy, and the informant says, shit. He said, that's one of the guys. That's one of their guys. That's one of their guys. And I'm almost nose to nose with him in this parking lot. And I said, hold on. And I had my gun in one hand, and then I just, peeled out of there and drove, and he was following us, and we're up on the radio. And I told him he had to press the button on the radio because I was not letting go of my gun in my hand. And we're just hauling ass around not far from LAX. And they like meeting in those places because obviously it's restricted airspace. So the police birds couldn't follow us, well then. So it was, we got out of it and we went home, and it was like, whoa, that was a good one.
Wow.
Yeah.
It does tend to tie relationships, though, in the squad area, and that's what we were kind of starting here from the very beginning. When you have that kind of relationship, you're kicking a door in with someone, and you have to depend on him or her to your left, your right, behind you, in front. You don't worry too much about the gossip stuff in the office the next day, because then
Forged in fire, right?
That's right. They've said that for millennia, probably, and it certainly applies to modern day personality quirks within the office place. So I was always glad. I got to the profiling unit, and it was definitely different there. Ray, you visited a few times. There was definitely some quirkiness in that area, and I attributed right away. I said, yeah, I'm not kicking down the doors with any of my colleagues here. And I got along great with a number of them. There was a few of them, though, to this day, I question a few things. But, you're not kicking in doors with people in an FBI law enforcement environment. It sometimes can lead to other gossipy issues developing and causing problems.
But I think you guys will also agree with me that some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life have been FBI agents. I mean, just one of the things I miss most is when there's a big event, like I'm sure we all remember 9/11, and you're in a room and you're in there with bomb techs and just explosive experts, WMD experts, all these people, Middle Eastern experts on, and as this thing is unfolding, just to watch that, it gives me goosebumps right now, just knowing the work that we did then and during other large scale cases where it is, you just go home and you're just in awe with the brains and the brawn that we were able to witness firsthand. It was something.
Just to be part of that, it's something.
Mm-hmm.
You were part of history. We all were.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing. But back to you. You get there eventually. You move over to the crim side and you start working narcotics and you start working gangs. How long after you were on the job in LA did they move you to that area? And did they move you there for a reason, or is that something that you requested to get moved over to?
Oh, I requested it because, I just had this, I requested it because it's what I always wanted. It was only a couple years. I want to say 3 years. I worked white collar, and then I moved over to maybe 5 years, and then I moved over to crim, and I just loved it. I told the assistant director at the time I really wanted to move over to crim, and so he was kind enough to help me a little bit.
So tell me about some of the cases that you got involved in. What type of gangs? Were you dealing with the Bloods, the Crips, or were you dealing with more local, regionalized gangs?
We were dealing with all kinds of gangs, and this is in the day when we were doing those large scale takedowns, and tons of wiretaps. I've sat on more wiretaps, and then, of course, later on, writing for wires, and people oftentimes in other instances where I was interviewing someone, not a gang member in this particular case, but they would say, "I think someone's tapping my phone," and I would just be like, "You are not interesting enough for us to write a 72-page affidavit and schedule our entire lives around what you say and who you're meeting. So let's just shelf that for a moment." But isn't that true? How many times have people told you that they're getting wiretapped because they hear the clicks on the phone?
Well, that's when you convince them to tell you everything right there in person, so it doesn't get out on the phone, and hopefully you get good information there too. It worked a few times with me. But people don't realize wiretaps. You don't just push a button. "Hey, judge, can we get?" "Yeah, sure, no problem." It is tons and tons of paperwork and tech work on multiple, and you have to man it or have people on it 24 hours a day, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, and it is labor intensive. And you have to minimize. People don't understand the concept of minimization, that you can't just listen to everyday conversations, and agents are supposed to actually turn off the phone if they start talking about the baby's diaper rash or something. So you turn it off, what you're listening to, this recording ends. Then like 2 minutes later, 3 minutes, whatever the schedule is, you turn it back on, and you're hoping that the baby's, diaper rash didn't actually mean, cocaine movement from one, ship to another or something. So it was really a fine line that had to be walked in terms of running a wiretap. Then they get to court. And of course, if the case is dependent on wiretap evidence, the defense attorneys will be pulling the agents apart forever. Did you minimize then? Did you minimize this time? So it's a difficult situation to do.
And you're just
that's right.
And then you'd sit around and say, when they were talking about the baby's diaper, were they talking about a load of dope? And then we crack up. But oftentimes it very well could be, the case. So I worked. We had a great squad. We had, oh my God, I was the only female on this squad, and they said most women don't last on the squad. There were only 2 before me, but the squad was C9, and it was our Camelot. I mean, all of us look back, and once upon a time, man, it was just magic. And that squad had a bunch of legends on it, and Aaron Escorza was on it, Ruben Iglesias, Dave Freon, just all these just wonderful guys. But Aaron Escorza he was just something to watch when it came to working narcotics. I mean, he was just unbelievable. But then we were all working the gang cases. The big gang case I worked was an MS-13 gang case out of here in Los Angeles, in a particular area called Hawaiian Gardens. And that case got kicked off when the Hispanic gang was murdering Black people, not gang on gang, just Black people, because they didn't want them in their neighborhood. And we had there were a number of things on the news where we would see these shootings and everything. And then a deputy sheriff named Jerry Ortiz thought he figured out who the person was that did this last shooting. And he went to the door of a residence where he had previously contacted this woman. And unbeknownst to him, when the door opened, the bad guy was right behind the crack of the door and pretty much executed him right there. At that point, they pulled together. They went to the United States Attorney's Office, to a very dear friend of mine named Mike Lowe, and they said, "Hey, we want to put together a task force, and we just want to be able to leverage all of the tools in the toolbox." And so they brought the bureau in. So I was brought in with a number of other entities, including DEA, and we figured out ways, like you do in every task force, who's going to pay for this wire? If we re-up in 30 days, who's going to pay for that? We just were just working it, and who's going to pay for this? How are we going to do surveillance? And it just, when all was said and done, when we came to our first takedown, we had more SWAT locations than we had SWAT teams in LA County. We had to go not only to San Francisco and San Diego, but for the first time ever, because one of my instructors at the academy was another legend, Dale Monroe, who was on HRT for a long time, and he was heading back to an HRT reunion, And I said, Dale, I need like 6 more SWAT teams. And anyhow, he goes to the reunion and he calls me while he's there, and you can hear all the guys in the background. He goes, how about if I bring out the HRT team? And I said, do they do that? And he goes, we can make it happen. And I was like, let's do it. So we ended up giving the HRT team, which at that time was the head of it was the guy from Black Hawk Down. He came out with those guys, and they took our most dangerous guy. They took that location, but it was just insanity. And that was 33 back-to-back wiretaps. So you guys, I mean, you talk about just organizing the logistics of surveillance teams, and since we had the task force was growing, and we would sometimes just call departments where we knew guys, and I worked with their dope team. We were all a part of CNOA, which is California Narcotics Officers Association. So these guys would help us. And I mean, it was just the one thing about Los Angeles that you guys don't probably never really enjoyed is our relationship with all other law enforcement entities is just second to none. We get along great. We have a blast. We work hard together, shoulder to shoulder, back to back all the time. We don't have a lot of the issues like they have in Chicago. I went there to work a detail one time, and it was just like, come on, folks, we're on the same team sometimes. Yeah. But
Maureen, I know our listeners know what SWAT teams are because they see that on TV. What's the difference between the SWAT team and the HRT team? What is the difference there for our listeners' purposes?
Well, HRT is the hostage rescue team that's run out of Quantico, Virginia, and it's just like essentially the hardest team to get on. It's most of them are military special forces guys, and they're the cream of the crop when it comes to SWAT teams all throughout the country. Like if you're a really good SWAT operator, your goal might very well be to one day be a member of the HRT team. They're just outstanding. Right, Fitz?
Their tryouts are like a week long, maybe even 2 weeks. They get you up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And it's and you got to go through sewer tunnels in Quantico, and it's a very tough. Yeah, that wasn't my thing. I did all my felony car stops as a police officer and on the bank robbery squad in New York. But I certainly know some people that were very good SWAT agents, but they just couldn't quite make it through the HRT training, and they are the cream of the crop. And then the local SWAT teams, and Ray, you were the head of the Philadelphia SWAT team.
I was not the head of the Philadelphia SWAT team, but I did put my name in a tryout. And then when Colleen got cancer, that's my wife, it kind of changed things up for me. And I decided to put my name, but I was going to go down and try out with the team. And I didn't. And
Colleen's fine now. Colleen's fine now, by the way.
Yes. For the last 42 years, we've been married, so she's good to go.
Still getting to know each other, huh?
Yeah. Still getting to know each other is right. Absolutely.
That's good.
But so I mean, when you look at, did you have a chance to work any international cases in working some of the drugs?
Yes, a lot of them, because we're in LA. We're right near Mexico and the border, and a lot of our stuff came to and from, and money shipments going back to Mexico. It was just a nonstop, of money going that way, drugs coming this way, and us trying to interdict. And we worked with a bunch of groups where I don't know how much of this we're supposed to talk about, but there's a group of agencies out there that are in commerce, and they come together and they have big war boards, and it's all about what's the phrase I'm looking for?
Consolidating, or
I don't know, where you're trying to cut this part out, where you're trying to make sure that you're not having blue on blue situations.
Friendly fire. I know what you mean. Undercovers working against each other.
Yeah, but what's the word? It's not interdiction stuck in my head, and that's not the word. It's
I know I know what you're talking about.
I can ask my husband.
We have an editor.
All right.
But
anyhow, we would work with those guys, and on that big gang case on our takedown, as I said, when we had HRT coming out and everything, we went in to get all the warrants signed. And as I said, we had 125 arrest warrants. And the judge told us we needed to freshen up like 35 of them or just switch the date. You guys can both imagine, switch the date. I've got SWAT teams from all over coming. I mean from PDs all over here. So I thought, oh God. So I just did on a wing and a prayer, the sergeant from LA County Sheriff and I called everyone we knew from all these departments, brought them together out at this location in Commerce. And we said, guys, I know we've tapped you guys so hard with all these surveillances and trying to bed these people down and make sure that they're where they're supposed to be. But we just got these 38 locations, or lokes, we call them, shut down, and we cannot change this date. We can't do it. There's too much in place right now. I'm wondering, is there any way? And, the sergeant was talking, and we're talking, as a group that lost someone we love and a great sheriff's deputy. He was good friends with my sergeant at the time. And so we said, is there any way you guys can help us with this? And we were both pleading, and in very short order. First, one of the guys from my husband's department said, I just texted my chief. He said, you got whatever you want. We'll give you everything. And boom, 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 all the way around the room. And I could still cry about it, thinking about it, because it was just so beautiful,
So saying that, thinking of that, we all have that one case, Maureen, that is kind of made our career, or that we'll never, ever forget. Would this be that case, or was there another case?
That would be the case. But then I also have, the set of cases from working ERT all those years. And we had a bunch of children that were kidnapped and ultimately murdered. And working those cases was terrible, beyond terrible, And a plane crash. I worked a plane crash, which are just, if you've worked them,
I have.
Plane crashes are just the worst.
I want to come back to ERT, evidence response team, and we'll have you give a little more to our audience about that. But just for a visualization, before we move away from some of the drug work, can you explain to us perhaps the largest either gun stockpile, drug collection, or even money amount that you've ever been in one room, one house, just to give some kind of, how many boxes, how many bales, how many weapons? I'm just curious from your memory. I've seen pictures in New York. I've been in some places pretty big, but not like some of the cases you're describing, I don't think.
For just our small squad, when I was first transferred over to that drug squad, that Camelot C9 squad, and C did not stand for Camelot. It was for obviously criminal, right? And,
yeah.
But we had a case where we were out in the Inland Empire. It was hotter than blazes out there, and we're all wearing shorts, which that's not common. That's how hot it was. We were all wearing shorts and tank tops, I think. And we ended up on this 4-day deal where we ultimately, stopped the guy. Then we had over $1 million. And so we had to, the first thing I got was nervous, because I don't like being around all that money, because,
things can go wrong around that kind of money.
Just because your count can be off. And then, it's like, all right, whatever. But so $1 million, and we took a photo with it, and I still have that photo. It's very faded. I wish there was something I could do about it, but that was great. And then on some of those big, huge gang cases we did, I was a stickler in ERT on how to package everything to make it look. I'm a big visual person when it comes to trial and court. And so I like everything done a special way, to the point where by the end of my career, and for that big gang case I talked about, but this case I'm telling you about is way before that, I would do a whiteboard and I'd say, all this evidence, I want it to look like this when you're done. And all this evidence, I want it to look like this. And I'm going to give you guys Sharpies. I don't want this defense attorney to walk in and see this evidence and just be like, these guys are not organized. I want him to walk in and say, holy shit, we're screwed, So that's how I did it. So I did a lot of these toward the end of my time with gangs and drugs. I did a lot of those huge takedowns where there'd be boatloads of guns and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilos of cocaine and it'd be crazy. Weed, well, we did a lot of those, just 2 tons of weed, but we never really worried about weed too much. We were looking for meth and cocaine and that kind of stuff. So in ERT, I saw as much or more of that than I did working those cases, the giant quantities, because everyone was bringing them in. And it was always, you always had a good feeling when you went home and you felt like you took all those drugs off the street. Good feeling.
I recall in my early days in the bank robbery squad in New York, there was no such thing as an evidence response team. We went into the banks and we processed fingerprints. It was kind of before the days of DNA, but certainly shootings of federal judges or on any kind of a military base, whatever, FBI, we would be the ones processing. I remember it was Dale Moreau. It sounds like the name Dale Munro, but Dale Moreau was a forensics guy at the FBI Academy. And he was a Cajun guy out of Louisiana. I always liked him. I know he's still out there. And he was put in charge of developing the ERT out of Quantico. So there'd be a team there eventually, but it was really designed initially to put agents who were experts in evidence collection, evidence processing, packaging, all very important. And Maureen, you were describing kind of the tail end of what you're doing, trial prep. But certainly before that, you better make sure every bag is numbered right. You have pictures, you have logs. And so, about maybe 92, 93 in my career in New York, I remember that's when they were talking about the formation of the evidence response team, which we on the bank robbery squad were doing every day ourselves anyway, carrying our big gray suitcases out through all the searchy bags and the print powder. Yep. So
brush your hands like a heavy pelican case.
I remember that very well. And there's a famous picture of me and Jim Clemente at a armored car robbery in Brooklyn. And for like a split second, he put the paintbrush, which is how you brush the fingerprint powder over a scene. He just put it in his mouth and he's doing something else with his hands. And that's the picture like the New York Post or Daily News printed. And everyone in the squadron saying, hey, Clemente came up with a way of dusting for prints with his mouth. And it was a fun over the whole thing. It looked okay on the newspaper, just a guy putting the paintbrush in there. Anyway, where I'm going here, they finally decided to make it more of a full-time or an expertise with the agents. Obviously, that came to LA, and you signed up for that. It sounds like relatively early on. Now, right. that was what do they used to call them? Collateral duty, right? It wasn't full-time for you?
That was a collateral duty, and I got to join right away. I had a lot of science in my background. I love science. I took a ton in college. I wanted to major in it, but with every science course in college, you have one day of classes and then another 3 hours, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you have like an hour of class, and Tuesdays and Thursday, you have a 3-hour lab each time. Wow. So it was just going to take too much time. But I got on ERT right away. My understanding is ERT started in 1984. I think Los Angeles had the first team field for the Olympics. So I think it was more of an ad hoc, hey, the Olympics are coming. We need a team together. Let's train them up and whatever in case something big happens at the Olympics. And we've been at every Olympic Games since that time. But I think it was a really great way to leverage all the subject matter experts that we have in the Bureau and bring them together. And and also when you're kind of burned out on a case, it's nice to go to an ERT training and just immerse yourself in some new technique or whatever for 3 to 5 days. It's nice. I always really, really, but I'm a student of life. I love to learn. I could go to school for the rest of my life. I still love to learn.
Well, you could also teach school for the rest of your life with everything you've learned and you could impart over the years if you chose to do that.
I might be a little bit too salty for that.
Hey, some of my best professors were the salty ones, right, Ray?
Yeah, that's true.
Do they call you salty?
They do sometimes now.
Yeah, Ray looks salty for sure.
You get a little bit in trouble doing that nowadays, but
I have a question here for Maureen. Yes. Our producers, when they were kind of researching you, they came up with a quote that you said, and I find it, especially in today's environment, I find it really, really interesting. You were quoted as saying, when the U.S. is divided, we are distracted.
Yes.
Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Can you elaborate for us what that means, especially today?
Well, I think that's exactly what we're seeing today with everybody pointing like this. You're the bad guy. No, you're the bad guy. No, you're the bad guy. No, you're the bad guy. We forget that we're all Americans and we're all here together. And when we're just worried about all this, divisiveness, we're not paying attention to what's at our back door, our front door, our and it's just a stupid waste of everybody's time. Just get focused and figure out what the threat vector is, the real threat vector, not the finger pointing, and get on with the mission at hand.
I like that.
I like it too, and I've seen Maureen on TV a number of times over the years. Sometimes we'll consult. I'll ask you if I'm going on. I'll ask you hey, what do you know about this? You'll do the same. We try to give each other tidbits of info, but Maureen always comes across great, always knows the right thing to say. Sometimes within hours of something happening, and we don't have much more information than what we're seeing in the media. We're not inside anymore, any of the three of us here, but we still do our best when we go on TV and give these hits, as we call them. And Maureen is always there. And I remember that quote when you did say it, and it's a very important one, and it holds very much true today.
And
Ray, I'm glad you picked that quote instead of some other ones. I appreciate that.
Hey, listen, I was being. I'm right here. Right here. I'm not being salty. Right.
Oh, no.
Not being salty.
You would know if Ray was salty.
Yes.
So we're wrapping up here a bit, but you retired a number of years ago, and you started your own company, Maureen O'Connell Associates. Tell us what you do with that. I know it carries over, of course, what you were doing in the FBI, and now you're doing it in the private sector. Tell us about it.
So MOA, or Maureen O'Connell Associates, is my business model was weird. It was like I wanted to pick the people I admired most and respected the most and want to spend time with and figure out a way to monetize that. And so I've curated this team of just world-class experts, because one other thing I did at the end of my career with the Bureau, I got burned out on all those wiretaps and that whole case and everything. I just, and they said, Maureen, you'd be great as the InfraGard coordinator, which is the public-private sector outreach coordinator for the Bureau. And I was like, I don't really like people that much. I think I'd be terrible. And the lead bomb tech, Kevin Miles, who I just adore, and his wife Reggie was, they were going to both retire on the same day, and she was the InfraGard coordinator. So she's like, "No, you'd be great." And thankfully, I listened to them and I did it. So I was able to figure out who all these vetted people were throughout the network in Los Angeles that were ready, able, and willing to help. First of all, they were subject matter experts or security experts, or they were decision makers in critical infrastructure and key resources throughout the our AOR, which is 7 counties in LA. Area of responsibility is AOR, and it gave me a great perspective on the need. I would listen to all these people from the outside, and this is what's happening, and this is our need, and how do we address it? And that was just such a great fit for me. So I thought, for my business when I retire, I'm going to do something similar. So I just curated this group of world-class experts within the FBI, and we just address different situations. I do crisis management. I have a lot of unbelievable clients and Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. And I've just been very, very, very blessed. But we work really, really, really hard. And we do what we can to address situations and pickles that people find themselves in. And we do it in a creative, thoughtful,
discreet,
very discreet. Yeah. I mean, just some of the stuff I've been able to work on, some of the stuff I'm working on right now, it's just pretty awesome. And I'm so happy to be able to help all my friends, because, getting all this work isn't easy, and it takes a lot of the work I did as an InfraGard coordinator. And then ultimately, when I retired, I was the national president of the whole InfraGard program, working with subject matter experts all throughout the country and how they can help the Bureau and other governmental agencies when, we're developing some new entity and the Bureau might need to know about it. As a case agent my whole life, as you guys can imagine, I know what a case agent is going to need. And I had someone tell me during my time in Infraguard, oh, we only need C-suite level executives. And I said, when did you ever call a C-suite level executive when you had a fluid situation on the street that had to be dealt with like that? Never. Because the first call they make is to legal, and that pumps the brakes for everything. So I just I loved that opportunity. I did that pro bono for 6 years, and that too was a lot of work, but it was a worthy cause, and we did a lot of great stuff there also. So 6 years after I retired, I was still going back to Quantico, going to headquarters, meeting with people, and it was a nice segue out of the Bureau.
Completely cutting your ties, which makes it a little bit easier, but although eventually that day has to come. So closing up here, you're the wife of a police officer who was on duty when you first got together, I'm sure.
Yes.
And then now you're the mother of a police officer.
I know.
Walk us blend any combination in there when your husband was working shifts, or I'm sure he was worried about you sometimes. What's that like? We like to put a human face on police officers as much as we can, and give us your perspective we know what your life was like in your career in the Bureau. Tell us what it's like now being the loved one of folks in this field of work.
Well, I mean, this year alone, I think we've had 283 police officers shot. Yeah. And it just, people talk about, citizens getting shot. No one's getting shot more than the police. So I was always worried about my husband. I was, because he's a real alpha guy, and, he's not going to back down. And they come from that. I think a lot of law enforcement also is this concept of leaning in. When everything tells you we lean in, and that's who my husband is. So I was worried about him, and I think I think women worry a lot. I think we worry probably more than most people. But when my son shocked me and told me he wanted to become a police officer, my friends weren't surprised at all. But I don't know why. I was stunned, and oh my God, sometimes I just can't even sleep. It's so hard. It's so hard because
he is your son, right?
Yeah, he's my only child.
Well, exactly. So, he came from you. You have it in your blood. What makes you think it's not in his too? And then look at your husband, right?
Right.
I mean, what he grew up around.
Right.
So it really must be something. You know what? There has to be a lot of fear that you go through. But you must be so proud too.
I'm so proud.
Must be so proud.
It's such a noble profession. Mm-hmm. I mean, to just go from location to location to sometimes he gets in his car and he's like, Mom, I had 17 calls waiting when I jumped back in my cruiser. And you just never know what you're showing up for.
That's right.
And just the level of scrutiny is just pretty crazy. It's not like, there were times where we had so much fun doing that kind of that great street work can be so much fun. It's dangerous, but it can be a lot of fun. And that too you talk about friendships forged in fire. That's where we see that all the time. I just wish the citizens would just have a better appreciation for what they do every day. All first responders. And I think also, I have a couple paramedics. My brother and sister spent, total of 60 years probably as paramedics on the south side of Chicago. And what they run into, and they're unarmed, and they're on the 6th floor of some project and having to carry someone down, and it's just, there's just a lot of trauma in first responders' lives and careers that I don't think is given any credence, and it really should be, because it's a lot. But my son, yes, I'm so proud of him. I got to see him yesterday. I just called him and said I was in what I thought would be his area, and he said, yeah, I'm 3 blocks away. I'll come over and give you a hug. And he gave me a hug, and then this lady came out and said, "Oh, am I getting a ticket or something?" And I said, "No, this is just my son, or this is my son." And she goes, "My son's a police officer too." And just instant bond with that woman, I was like, yes, it's good. So my son played Division I water polo in college, and one of his teammates is also an officer on his department. They went in right around the same time, so I'm very happy about that. I love both those kids.
Well, I have to ask you this. Do you think there is a chance that he may make the jump into the Bureau?
No.
Or is he going to stay?
No. He's going to stay because his original career out of college was finance. That's what he thought he was going to do his whole life. And then, of course, my husband and I were like, well, talk to the agents retiring and talk to the police officers retiring because, give them the best shot and what you think they should do or whatever. We just wanted him to, interface with law enforcement officers. And he said one day he was driving home back to the office in Century City to meet with all these, finance guys. And he was like, I just came to the realization that I don't want to go hang out with these finance guys. I want to go back and hang out. Those are my people, and I was like, oh no, when he first told me, but yes, I'm very proud of him. And so with the finance thing, he did everything on a whole Excel spreadsheet of what department, what their benefits are, long-term 401k, how much they get, how many years, all the stuff. And so he narrowed it down to 3 or 4 departments, and that's what he.
Yeah, well, you never know. He could wind up, because that business background is great for budgets and things of that nature. It could be chief material down the road. You never know.
Yeah, but he did, someone else said that, and I said, I don't want him to promote too early because
right.
You don't want to be a blue flamer. And then I was like, why are you telling him that? He could just, he'll be out of harm's way.
It gets him off the street too. It gets him off the street, Maureen.
He'll be a detective, I think.
Sounds like he may not be ready to come off the street. I remember what it was like as a uniformed patrol officer. You didn't really want to leave. You make it a 5% promotion as detective or 10% as a sergeant, but you're the fun. I mean, fun in a healthy way. You're taking care of the citizenry, your colleagues on the job. You're responding just like you described. You never know what you're going to roll into. Every car stops the same way. Don't think I ever hugged my mother while I was wearing my uniform in a street somewhere, but
I don't think he had much of a choice, Fitz. Let's just call it what it is.
And on that pleasant note, I'm glad you gave us the choice, Maureen, of coming on Cold Red. No surprise, you were a great guest. Ray, any final words? Then I'll take us out.
Thanks, Maureen. It's great to finally see you in person here, and I hope one day we'll get a chance to meet in person. And not just over this connect. Oh, absolutely. We'll have more than one.
Yeah.
Maybe even a hug. She seems to give them out pretty readily.
Oh, we're totally having a hug.
It's an Irish thing, right?
Yes.
I have no problem with the Irish thing.
Yeah. Oh, this is my maiden name, O'Connell.
O'Connell.
When we got married, my husband's like, well, there's 2 reasons I didn't change my name. One, I mean, really? You can't.
Paperwork.
You can't beat O'Connell.
No, you can't.
Hello? The second one was, I was already working narcotics at the time, and I didn't want anyone to be able to find my son. That was my thought process at the time.
I hear you.
How many people have to worry about that in their jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where's your people from over there in Ireland?
Kerry and Connemara.
Kerry and Connemara. Tyrone and Mayo.
Nice.
That's me.
Cork.
I know you were in Cork. I saw the bar. I sent him a picture. I was over Easter with my wife. And I said, I can't get away from you. And I sent him a picture. He was in Hawaii. I was in Ireland.
What are the odds, right?
I've got to go back.
Oh, I'm going back. It's the best.
Me too. Early next year. It's the plan.
Maybe we should go together, guys.
Let's do it.
On that pleasant note, we'll do a live broadcast from Fitzgerald's Pub in Cork, Ireland, the 3 of us.
Why not?
And we'll get it out there.
O'Connell Street in Dublin.
There you go.
Or there.
That's another good spot.
Or Carr.
Well, there's my mother's maiden name is Halligan.
Massage parlor and bath house.
Massage parlor. Now, there's a Halligan bar and hotel in Mayo, so we could always go over to Mayo, go over to the Halligans. Those are still some of my relatives that are over there now.
My grandmother's dairy farm is still in the family in Kerry, and they sell all their milk to Kerrygold butter.
Yeah.
So every time I buy it, I think, this could be from Grandma's farm.
That's right.
Well, not just to our Irish audience, who I'll ask this of, but everyone else. Thanks again for watching or listening to this episode of Cold Red. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Check out the coldredpodcast.com. I want to thank Rick Schilling, our music director, Matt Robinson, Matt McLaughlin, our producers, of course, my co-host, Ray Carr, and our wonderful guest tonight, Maureen O'Connell. Thanks to all of you here on View Now, and to everyone out there listening and watching. And we'll see you next time on Cold Red.